So why should 90% of property investors use leverage when they're buying their investment properties? The obvious answer is you're going to get a better return on your investment if you bought in a location where properties will grow in value. The main reason for this is you get a return based on the value of the property, not the amount of cash you put in. Let's say, for example, you buy a property worth 200k, that property grows by 10% in a number of years, let's say 2 years, 3 years, that 10% is 20 grand, that additional £20,000 is your equity. So the £50,000 deposit you put in will have grown to £70,000, so your equity has grown in line with the value of the property. We can compare that with buying a property in cash. Let's say, for example, you bought a property in cash which is worth £70,000. You're not going to get much for that, but that's about the amount of cash you would need to buy a property worth £200,000 if you're using leverage. If you're buying a property worth £70,000, the likelihood is you're buying at the bottom end of the market in an area where demand isn't very high. Let's say, for example, that property does grow in value. So let's say it's grown by 10% in that 2-year period. That property is growing from £70,000 to £77,000. That means you've got 7 grand of equity in that 2-year period. We can then compare that to a property that you bought worth £200,000. So that £50,000 deposit that you put into the property will have grown by that £20,000. So when you actually look at a return on cash, it's really strong because you're getting a return on the value of the property, not the amount of cash you put in. If we then extrapolate that data for a 5, 10, 15-year period, that growth will be second to none, and it's really where property comes into its own when you're comparing it to things like stocks and shares and funds. To leverage in property, it's relatively low risk. So as long as you make sure you're buying properties that are primed for long-term growth in areas that are improving, you're onto a winner.